What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Movies That Make You podcast, where movies are more than just entertainment, they're a catalyst for meaningful conversations. I'm Jonathan Sprang, and I go by Sprang. And most weeks, we dive into movies to watch in preparation for the new releases hitting theaters. But we don't stop there. We explore the morals, the deeper ideas, and the life lessons that these films have to offer. This week, we got Kristen on the episode to talk Wolfman. We're going to be audio only this week. We might get to video when it's Kristen and I, but right now we're just doing video with the kids. And that way it just makes it a little bit easier for us to record our podcast just really quickly without having to set up a whole bunch of equipment. So hope you enjoy this episode. We touch on the original Wolfman, we touch on the 2010 Wolfman, American Werewolf in London, and a host of other films that influenced our understanding and our idea of the mythology of werewolves and things like that, all to gear up for the movie that drops this Friday, Wolfman, directed by Leigh Whannel. We're super excited for this film based on his history of the Invisible Man film and others. We hope you enjoy this episode. You can follow our movie journey and join the conversation on Instagram at Movies That Make You, and check out our lists on Letterboxd at I Am Spring. You'll find the movies that make you laugh, the movies that make you cry, the movies that make you scream, and everything in between. Before we dive into this week's episode, here's a sneak peek of the next 4 weeks on the Movies That Make You podcast. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Rocky series. We've got our good friend Nick Hot Coal Shepherd. He's going to join us again. We had him on the podcast last year and we talked Southpaw and Hands of Stone. This time he wanted to come back, be on the podcast with the boys. So we'll be on video again next week. We've got Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and Rocky Balboa. So we're going to be touching on all those films and how each one of those plays a part in that story. And we're going to get his take on it as a boxer in real life. How did the fighting measure up in these films? The week after that is the first Monday of February. So for the month of love, we're going to be talking about movies that make you fall in love. Kristen's going to bring her top 5. I'm going to bring my top 5, and we'll see where we land. Do we have any of these in common? Let's check it out. The week after that, we're going to be gearing up for Captain America, A Brave New World. It's the first Captain America film that features Anthony Mackie as Captain America. He made that transition in the Disney Plus series Falcon and Winter Soldier. To gear up for that, we're going to be discussing the films that we've seen him in the Marvel Universe, and most of those are the Captain America films. So we'll talk Winter Soldier, we'll talk Civil War, we'll talk Infinity War, Endgame, and then we'll touch on the actual series as he transitioned into Captain America. So going to be a good, fun episode with the boys as we discuss those films. The week after that, we're going to be touching on a Stephen King short story that's going to be coming into films called The Monkey. It's one of those old kind of symbol monkey toys. It just kind of claps its hands. That becomes obviously something demonic and something possessed, and so it's killing people or whatever. So we're going to touch on some of those types of films that are scary and that actually have these kind of marionettes or toys that become evil. So we'll be doing an episode to gear up for that. Hope those episodes excite you. So without further ado, let's get to the podcast. We are back with another episode of the Movies That Make You podcast. I am Sprang, and today I'm joined by my lovely wife, Kristen.
How's it going, everybody?
We are in the middle of January 2025. This is the third episode of 2025. It's going by fast, but there's a movie coming out this Friday that you're super excited about, which is Wolfman.
I am excited about it, and I actually just found out that Ryan Gosling is a co-producer on it, so that's even cooler.
Oh yeah, Notebook's very own Ryan Gosling. So is he on your list?
Of course he's on my list.
Yes. So we're excited for Wolfman. It looks super interesting. It really intrigues me, and we're going to get into all of that, all why it intrigues us, as we kind of get through the podcast. So just stick around because it's going to be a jam-packed episode. But before we do that, let's check in. How's life going?
It's been busy. Just had a great Christmas and New Year's, and just coming back. I do want to put a shout out to all those that were affected by the fires. I just pray that you guys are safe, that you're able to kind of come to peace, and I don't know. It's unimaginable. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine. I mean, it's just been going, all over our Instagram feeds and just seeing the devastation, seeing like just everybody's affected. It kind of equalizes everybody because everybody that was in those areas is affected, no matter if you're an actor or just a regular person living in that area. And it's just devastating. So yes, prayers out to everybody that's been affected by that. As far as me, 2025 is going pretty good. Kind of kicking in the year with work and trying to get things cracking, hit the ground running, all that kind of stuff. Kid stuff's going intense, starting off the new year, already into trouble, That's kind of frustrating, but it is what it is. It's all comes with the territory of parenting. So fun times. Um, well, cool. What was your first experience that you ever had hearing or seeing anything to do with werewolves?
I think well, first off, I love wolves just in general. So to me, a werewolf, I know they're fictional, but it wasn't like I really analyzed it too much. It was more, I think Teen Wolf, there was a movie that came out when I was like early, I don't know, around 10 or 11. I didn't actually watch it, but I just remember seeing something on TBS too, where they probably were doing like reruns and just looked weird, where like this teenager just has some hair starting to grow on his hands and then out his face. And so it wasn't really my cup of tea, just because it's kind of in like that imaginary world. But whenever I saw the previews for this movie coming up, it kind of got me interested again. So I'm excited to see, especially with what CG and technology we have, it makes it look more realistic.
Yeah, and I'm actually the same way. I think Teen Wolf was probably one of the first times I ever saw anything to do with werewolves. I don't know where I would have heard about it before, but Teen Wolf 1985, that's probably what you saw on TBS was a rerun or an airing of Teen Wolf with Michael J. Fox, and he's a basketball player, and he's no good. He stinks at basketball. He's on the bench, and then he gets to he finds out that he's a werewolf, and so as a kind of like this puberty thing, his dad's a werewolf, and now when he's hitting puberty, he realizes he can become a werewolf. It doesn't follow the same rules that some of these other movies follow, which we'll get into, but he can just become a werewolf if he wants to, and so then he wolfs out, as they call it, and then he plays really well, and he takes him to the championship and all this stuff, and then they're in the championship game. And you know what, guys? I need to not rely on the wolfness. So he doesn't become a werewolf. He becomes back to his human, and then they, try to win the championship. So it's like one of those kind of feel good, silly kind of takes on the werewolf genre. Most of it's horror based, but this is more lighthearted. And of course, it's got Michael J. Fox. So I mean, Back to the Future, Family Ties. Like this guy is just, you know, he's on everybody's, love this actor list.
And that was back in his heyday too. He was really big.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was probably the first time I ever saw him. Now speaking of Teen Wolf though, I did want to mention there was a show on MTV that they kind of rebooted this idea. They took it a lot more seriously. It did have a little bit more horror elements, but it was like a TV show. I think it ran for 3 or 4 seasons, and then they did a movie that came out a couple years ago. I watched it. It's fine. It's definitely like a made for TV movie. It's not like something that you'd see in the theater, but because I had watched the show, I watched two or 3 seasons of it, and I think it kind of went off. But I enjoyed the idea that they're trying to go with. It was kind of like the WB style of telling this kind of story that these young kids and they're growing up in high school and all the drama, but then you throw in this other kind of idea too, where there's this secret society and there's people that hunt the werewolves, and then there's the werewolf group, and it's like this battle that's been going on for ages. And then the main character, his girlfriend's dad hunts werewolves, and then he finds out he's a werewolf, and so it's this kind of Romeo and Juliet type of drama that takes place throughout it. But one of the things that it does have in it, I believe, is it does have the point where if you get bitten by a werewolf, you are now become a werewolf yourself, but you're also kind of like a servant to, like, it's like the person that bit you is like your alpha. So it's kind of like that. And then there's the main character's brother is an alpha or whatever, and he kind of leads the clan or whatever. So it kind of takes it and goes a little bit more, pulling in some more ideas than the Teen Wolf movie obviously did, because it was just a movie, 1.5 hours. But the show tried to take it more mythology.
And in today's terms, I'd be called a Sigma.
Yes, yes. It's definitely the Sigma of all the werewolves. But yeah, one of the other ones that really, when I was a kid growing up, one of the movies that caught my attention was a movie called Lady Hawk. It starred Michelle Pfeiffer, Matthew Broderick, and Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer is from Blade Runner. He was the one replicant that became aware. He was kind of like the villain of the movie, but at the end, it's like he's not really a villain. He's just trying to be alive and be a person and not be a replicant. But but the story, the mythology, Matthew Broderick plays this kind of, it's in like the old world, like medieval time type situation. um, Matthew Broderick plays this young squire or whatever, and he's been tasked with kind of taking care of Rutger Hauer's, being his kind of servant or whatever. And he has a hawk that's like his pet. Well, then at night, there's this cute lady that starts wandering around, and he's like, "Oh, she's pretty. I like her." And then there's this wolf that's always around. So then you find out halfway through the movie or so that they were cursed. They were in love. They shouldn't have been in love. And they were cursed by a witch. So he had to be a wolf at night where she could be human at night. And then they swapped, and she was a hawk in the day and he was a human during the day. So they could never be together. So there's this kind of dramatic role. But it was always kind of fascinating to me, like the idea of like, oh, okay, there's another kind of wolf situation kind of changing from human to wolf. But that was one also in 1985 actually, that kind of caught my attention as a kid, probably because of Michelle Pfeiffer. I think because of Batman or other, maybe even this movie might have been the first movie I'd seen her in, but she was kind of an attractive lady when I was growing up, and still is. But that was one that caught my attention, and I think Matthew Broderick, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, all that stuff, he kind of was taken off in the 80s too. Um, so that was kind of like my introduction to werewolves, was like Teen Wolf and Lady Hawk. But then there was one other movie that we watched together that I said we got to watch this one. It's kind of a take away, a jump away from the traditional werewolf story, and this one's called Wolf. It also stars Michelle Pfeiffer, but it has Jack Nicholson as this. Basically, he's like a editor at a book company, a publishing house, and there's this young whippersnapper editor that's coming up, and he's going to surpass him, um, in the ranks, and he's going to get a promotion where this guy should have gotten it because he's been there longer, all this stuff. And so there's this kind of drama. But one of the things about Jack Nicholson's character is he's very reserved. He's more kind of, been walked on his whole career, and he's not really shown any alpha tendencies. And so he ends up getting attacked or getting scratched by a wolf in New York, and then he begins to exhibit those kind of classic story beats where it's the full moon, that we traditionally think about with the werewolves, is that the full moon is what brings out the werewolf. And so I really enjoyed that movie growing up. I thought it was cool because it was in present day. It was New York. It was, he began after getting that scratch and becoming the wolf the first time. It's like he now has more confidence during the day. He has confidence as a human. He feels like he's fighting for what he deserves. He's doing what he needs to do to be successful in his career, and he's not being walked on anymore. He even marks his territory when the young whippersnapper, who is James Spader, a young James Spader, um, is trying to take over his career. He kind of even pees on him in the bathroom, and it's like, just marking my territory. And it's just this really classic, like great funny line. But that was always one that grabbed my attention because I think it was the Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer, and it's the modern day take on the werewolf idea. What were your thoughts on that movie?
I really liked it. I thought that it was a really well shot film. Jack Nicholson's hilarious. He just has this demeanor about him, kind of like this air, where it's a little bit of a cocky air. Even when he was more subdued, you could still see it. And then I liked how with him becoming a werewolf, he then just started like using his senses more, and he could smell more, and ends up finding out his wife's having an affair on him, and um, with that protege who was trying to take his position. So I just thought the whole movie was really well done. I like Michelle Pfeiffer too. She was in White Oleander. That's when I first met her. Um, and I thought it was cool that even where the Michelle Pfeiffer's character, build this relationship and I believe they just fall in love, and she is willing to change herself so that she can be with him, and so that was kind of a cool twist that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that, and then that he told her that it was happening, and then that she's kind of like, well, let's, we'll take care of this. And there's a big fight at the end, and James Spader also gets scratched, and he becomes a wolf, and they have to have a big battle at the end. But just one of those interesting movies. When you look back at some of these older movies, you see all these actors that pop up, and they've been in all these other films. I think this was just one that was very interesting. I don't know how well it did like in box office or whatever. I mean, it's got 3 stars on Letterbox, but it's just one of those movies that for whatever reason it caught my attention, and I really dug it. So definitely check that one out if you're at all interested in these kind of werewolf stories. Like I said, it doesn't follow all the same ideas that we've seen in some of the other ones, but it definitely kind of followed that full moon is when this happens. Um, so let's actually kind of go back to actually let me touch on a couple others that you haven't seen just to kind of really quickly kind of highlight them. Underworld is one we talked about for the Dracula series because it deals with vampires. But there's also this kind of battle between, like, kind of how we were talking about with the Teen Wolf show, where there's this kind of gangs that kind of historically been against each other. In Underworld, it's the vampires and it's the lichens. So the lichens are the werewolves, and so that's kind of they're fighting the werewolves in that series. Also, another one, Twilight. Kristen Stewart's character Bella is in love with a vampire and a werewolf. So they're, Team Jacob or Team Edward was that whole fiasco. So that's another one that has the vampires and werewolves in it.
And that one came out actually during my high school years. I remember a lot of people reading them along with Harry Potter at the same time. And again, I just didn't get into that. It just didn't really capture my attention, but I mean, obviously it was a big deal. A lot of people liked them.
It's funny. Grayson's favorite vampire series is Twilight, and it's like, and he also says like he knows, oh, it's cheesy, oh, it's goofy, like we get it. That's part of its charm. That's part of why the fans of the series like it. So yeah, and I told him on that episode, like there was one time I went and I was like, people are giggling at their acting. I'm like, aren't they supposed to be the fans of the show? They're here opening night. Like you'd think they would be like taking this seriously. Oh, but they're laughing just along with everybody else that's laughing at the movie because it's so cheesy. But it's like that's the heart of it. It's like this kind of Romeo and Juliet meets you know vampires and werewolves and this kind of love triangle and all that stuff. So, but that was an interesting thing. While the vampires are the main kind of draw of that film, or the main kind of side of that film that draws you in, there's the werewolf side of it as well. And they've had this kind of historically battled against each other, but now they both love one girl, so they have to figure out how to survive and how to work together. Um, One other one that's a kind of a quick one. There's actually a comic book series called Werewolf by Night that was put out by Marvel in 2022. Marvel Studios did a quick like 45-minute single episode of that story and put it on Disney Plus, and it was pretty good. I watched it when it came out just by myself, and I thought it was really good. It should. All right, so let's kind of jump back to the beginning, back to the first werewolf film that ever came out, 1941, The Wolf Man. This was directed by George Wagner. It was our first iteration of this idea on film. We talked about when we were watching it. That's also the same year that Dracula came out, and it was the kind of these films all kind of fell into this Universal Studios monsters universe. They had Creature from Black Lagoon, Bride of Frankenstein, Frankenstein. This was all part of that Universal Monsters group of films that all came out. And I actually didn't get a chance to watch the Dracula one in preparation for Nosferatu, but we did get a chance to watch The Wolfman, 1941. What did you think?
So, I found it interesting with this gentleman who is the characters. First of all, there's like a son and a dad. They look to be around the same age. So that was kind of interesting, which it then takes me back to like how a plays used to be, where you just basically are the character. It doesn't really matter what you look like. And then there's this other part at the beginning where first of all, he looks through this telescope and checks out this lady, and he is just creeping on her. Then he figures out where she lives. So then he goes to her store and is basically very pushy about, hey, I want to take you on a date. And she repeatedly tells him no. And it really highlights the change as that we've approached, in 80 years, how men and women interact, especially with, when a woman says no. So that really caught my attention. But as for the story, I thought the acting was well done. It was a little extra in the sense that kind of like a play would be. Um, but after they run into this fortune teller, and their this girl's best friend gets killed by a werewolf, but they can't figure out like what it was. They just thought the man attacked her. But then they had gone and gotten their fortunes told, and they're now just kind of let's see. Oh, so the gentleman tries to help this lady's friend, but then he gets attacked, and so then he's just trying to, figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and they like brings in the Scotland Yard, and then they're all investigating and they set traps and all this stuff, and then he starts exhibiting the werewolf tendencies. And what's interesting about this one is it's not even like full moon necessarily; it's like just nighttime. Nighttime, he just becomes a werewolf and wanders around. And so they try to set traps for him, and they catch him, but then he is able to turn back because the fortune teller lady, says some trance, like some phrase, and it able to turn him back. And then we find out later that the first werewolf was her son, and he had this guy had killed her son, but she was understanding of it because he was a wolf at the time. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of this. He falls in love with her. He wants to save her, wants to protect her, but then he realizes she's also got a fiance. But then she's willing to run away and with him and throw away the whole relationship and everything.
She didn't even tell him at the beginning, "No, I can't go on a date with you because 'cause I'm engaged." No. She's just like, "No." But what was crazy about this whole, if you are already enchanted by this werewolf being, you got the star that looked like a kindergartner drew, and it's like it just shows up on the body somewhere. One, it was on a dude's forehead, the other one, it was then on his arm, and it's just kinda, or his chest.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they said at the very beginning that if the werewolf sees a star on someone's hand, that person's going to be their next victim. He sees it on her hand, so he tries to get away from her because he doesn't want to hurt her. But yeah, and it's interesting. The father doesn't believe him at first, so he ties him up, and then so it's just it definitely introduces us to this world. And there's some things that carry on to other werewolf ideas, but really it's this one is I would say it's actually somewhat unique in the story as opposed to just kind of just a werewolf story. The Wolfman is somewhat of a different mythology because it still has the scratch you change, but it doesn't carry some of the other, like we said, the full moon and those kind of things. It doesn't carry that with it. Um, but I thought it was a pretty good film. I mean, I give it 4 stars, on Letterboxd because, man, this is even the transitions, like, they just did a fade, but they did transitions of the fade to try to say, like, "Hey, this is the best technology we got, guys, but we're gonna still show this transition from human to wolf." And I thought they tried to do a good job of it. And, of course, like, they're like, "It's wolf prints." It's like, th those are the biggest wolf prints you'd ever see because 'cause they're human feet with, like, wolf padding, like it doesn't look wolf. Nobody would think that's a wolf print ever, but they said it. So anyway, um, but what I would say is they retold this story back in 2010 with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins, and this one really was a retelling, almost verbatim, of that story. Same thing, father son situation. Lawrence instead of Larry. but it's still there's a friend that's a Scotland Yard that ends up being Hugo Weaving. Emily Blunt plays this young girl who actually um, was the fiance of Lawrence's brother, and Lawrence's brother gets killed by a wolf, and they're trying to track down that killer. In the meantime, Lawrence gets attacked by a wolf. They find out later in the film that it's Anthony Hopkins' dad is actually the werewolf that's been attacking and killing, and he's been doing this for years. He actually killed their mother, all this stuff, all to try and keep everybody here. You aren't leaving me. You're going to be here, and you're going to stay here. You know, kind of this control thing.
And even Lawrence had seen his dad attacking his mom, and what was his name, right? Lawrence. And then he all of a sudden he's like having these nightmares, and so just to keep the yeah, but to keep Sir John safe, he puts his son into a psychiatric ward just to keep him locked away, and just to basically say, "Oh no, you're crazy. You don't know what you saw." But it comes out that he did in fact see his dad kill his mom.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, like, just hiding away, and it was kind of funny, well, interesting because earlier in the film, we see the same scenes, but he's seeing his father there. Later, when he's kind of his right mind, we see his father as the wolf there. So it's like the psychiatrist is the psychiatric ward and all the electroshock therapy and the all the shots and the drugs that they're giving him to make him forget, all of that's starting to kind of play on him now that he's a wolf himself. It's actually like, he's somewhat resisting of those methods, so much so that they actually lock him up to in a room. They have the entire like town's council there, and they're like going to show him like, hey, it's a full moon, but look, this isn't going to affect him at all. And then it does, and he kills half the people. One thing I want to point out too was, while the original Wolfman was PG, this one definitely is a hard R, as far as just straight up gore. Like, it just really tried to amp up the kills and kind of bring this kind of Wolfman into a modern sensibility of what this would actually do. And so they tried to lean into that. I did find it interesting that Joe Johnston directed this, and he's also been one that's he directed the first Avenger, Captain America. He directed Rocketeer. He directed Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. Um, it's or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Jurassic Park 3. So I mean, he's a guy that's been around for a long time and done a lot of movies that a lot of us have grown up on and enjoyed. And so the fact that he did this one is also interesting. I think he likes the old world stuff, kind of with the Rocketeer thing being a 1940s kind of superhero, kind of bringing that 1940s Wolfman story to a modern audience. I thought he did pretty good job. It didn't do well in theaters. It didn't get good on Rotten Tomatoes, but I enjoyed it for what it was. Cool. Well, the next two films we'll talk on, I think, are the ones for me that when I think about the werewolf mythology, these are the ones that kind of follow it all around. And they actually borrow some of it from the Wolfman, um, in that one of the comments that they said was the moor, stay away from the moor. So American Werewolf in London came out in 19. Sorry, what was that?
American Werewolf in London came out in 1981.
Yeah, and it kind of borrows a little bit from the mythology of Wolfman in that they're in Old England. They're also there's this bar, which in the Wolfman there's a bar that people go into, and everybody kind of looks at them funny for being there. Why are you here? Same thing in American Wolf in London. There's a bar that they go into, and they're basically asked like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" Because it's full moon night, we're gonna have some issues. They don't know that, but that you can tell everybody else does, and they say avoid the moor.
The moors, I think, just like the grassy hills.
Yeah, and just stay on the path and don't leave the path. And then they end up leaving the path. One of them gets killed, and then actually the other guy is scratched and becomes a werewolf. And this one is also somewhat like comedy driven as well. There's some funny parts to it. The friend that killed ends up coming around and haunting the guys, like, because we were killed by a werewolf and that werewolf's still alive, we're kind of just wandering undead people. You need to kill that werewolf or kill yourself as the werewolf, because that will let us pass on to whatever the afterlife is in this world. But what was your take on this American Werewolf in London?
I liked it. There was a couple times where even though it was funny and it had some light humorous moments, there were a couple scary moments. Especially for being a 1981 movie, there was a flash that made me jump.
I think when a lot of people think about the effects, the visual effects that they did in this film, it was revolutionary at the time. The look of the werewolf, the transition of the werewolf was the first time anybody had ever seen this kind of on screen.
Yeah, that transition was really, really neat, especially to kind of see it in as it's happening rather than like, you look at one part and then you pan away and then come back to it and it's just totally different. So this kind of showed the feet growing out and his body transitioning into the werewolf. That was cool.
Yeah, and I actually just kind of glancing at, I mean, I knew the directors by name. John Landis definitely came to mind. Hey, he's a really famous director. Just clicking on his name and seeing all the films he's done. This is one thing I told Kevin, because Kevin is the one that actually, friend of the podcast, guest of the podcast. He's the one that suggested we watch this film. And I mentioned to him that I wonder if it was the same team that did this film that actually did Thriller for Michael Jackson, and it's actually right. Michael Jackson hired John Landis to do the Thriller music video because he wanted it to be more like a film, and he actually transitions in that film as well. His hands kind of become like the werewolf hands, and he gets scary in the face and all this stuff, and it's kind of a scary music video. But John Landis also did Animal House. He did Trading Places with Eddie Murphy. He did Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. He did Beverly Hills Cop 3 with Eddie Murphy. He did Three Amigos, which is one I grew up on. He did The Blues Brothers. He did Blues Brothers 2000. I mean, this guy is just an 80s, like, just icon of directors. Like, all those films together, I mean, just are just incredible. So, directed by John Landis, great acting, great stuff. One of the cool things is both these guys are going to be at Fright Fest, which is, I'm super excited. We're going to head up there. It's going to be in Dallas, and we're going to be over there, kind of getting our 3-day pass and going to see what we see.
Jonathan asked me, he was like, "Okay, Kristen, I have a question." I'm like, "Oh, what? Do you want to go to Fright Fest?" So it should be good. I'm excited. I've never been to anything like that before. Let's just keep the jump scares, keep those on your own. Don't come at me, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
Are we dressing up?
I mean, we can look at it and see if we want to dress up for sure. I mean, there's going to be so many people there, so many cool actors and stuff that we're going to try and get some autographs.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah, awesome. So let's kind of take a jump from that American Werewolf in London to American Werewolf in Paris. So I brought this one up because of like, oh, I remember seeing this when I was in high school or when I was in college. We should see it. It is awful. It is so bad. I think they were trying to do it as a sequel to An American Werewolf in London, but it definitely fell flat for me. It starred Tom Everett Scott and Julie Delpy. Tom Everett Scott I knew from That Thing You Do. He was the drummer, kind of the main character in that film that Tom Hanks brought in. Really liked his style and brought the band in, and became famous, and then it all fell apart. All that stuff. Julie Delpy I know from the After series, which is her and Ethan Hawke. It's After Sunset, After Sunrise, and After Midnight. One of the best trilogies ever that nobody ever talks about, because it's a love story between these two folks. It's in real time, meaning that the director brings them back together to do another film, and it's been that time since their character also. And so there's three, and there's like a decade between each film, but it's this really interesting thing. I think they're all three of them are like 99 or 100 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's just really, really crazy. So one of these days we'll watch that trilogy, because I think it's really cool. It's really just conversation. It's those two in a conversation for an hour and a half, but it's like talking about life and love and what it means to be in love, and what it means to be a human being. So that's what I know her from. But this film, it's just, as one of the podcast guys I listen to, it's garbage. It's just garbage. The graphics are bad. The logic of, like, they're gonna go bungee jump off the Eiffel Tower. Like, you can't do that. It's curved. Like, you're gonna die. Like, it's curved out. There's no way to bungee jump off the Eiffel Tower, but that's their big plan. And then they catch her. She's gonna commit suicide, and then they save her by bungee jumping and catching her. Like, okay, that's dumb.
Within
Uh,
the first 5 minutes.
yeah. So we watched it, we finished it, but that's never gonna happen again. I have it too high on my letterbox rating, so I'm just gonna drop that down. I probably did that based on what I thought it was gonna be like before, what I remembered from it, but yeah,
The acting was awful, the story was just corny. Um, yeah, visuals not great. Got a whopping 7 on Rotten Tomatoes, and yeah, I don't recommend it. So save yourself an hour and a half.
absolutely. Um, So that kind of covers all the werewolf movies. But I did want to bring up the director. The director's name is Leigh Whannel. He has been an actor for a number of years. He has been a producer for a number of years. He has directed 4 films. One of those was a movie called Upgrade, which when I watched it, I was just floored. It was so great. Basically, it's in the near future. There's a technology that you can get implanted into your spinal cord so that this guy that's paralyzed can walk again. So he's in a car wreck. His girlfriend passed away. His girlfriend died in the car wreck. So he's paralyzed, but they put this new technology in him. And it's basically an AI in his head. So he can hear and he can talk to the AI in his head. Nobody else knows what's going on. And he can kind of tell the AI what he wants to do. And so he's able to kind of live a normal life where he wouldn't have been a paraplegic. He would have to be in a wheelchair. So he's able to kind of do some really cool things. He can get on his own and do all that stuff. Well, he ends up getting obsessed with trying to track down the people that hit his car that killed his girlfriend. And the AI takes it upon themselves, like, well, yeah, we're gonna do more than just find them. We're gonna kill them. And then he's like, no, 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 we don't need to do this. And so there's really cool kind of body gag stuff where not funny, but it's like just where the AI is taking over his body and making him do things that he's not wanting to do. And like, no, I don't want to do that. And like punching. So it's similar to like Venom, where Venom takes over, or the other movies like Mask or something. Or anyway, it's very interesting. That storytelling mechanic is really cool. I really thought that movie was great. So when I saw that he also was the one that directed this, I was like, or that he directed Upgrade, I was like, that's really cool that this guy's been doing that. His first direction was Insidious Chapter 3, which we haven't watched. We watched 1 and 2 with Jacob for Insidious Red Door, but we'll probably watch Insidious Chapter 3 as we gear up for the new Insidious movie this summer. But I just wanted to mention those 2 films because it's kind of part of his filmography. But his third film we watched together, and that is The Invisible Man, and this is starring one of our fun actresses that we like, and that is Elizabeth Moss. Got her start, I think. I mean, probably not her start, but we saw her first. I saw her first in Mad Men, and then she's also in The Handmaid's Tale. But we watched this Invisible Man movie, and we were just like, that was great.
Yeah, it was very gripping. It was really creepy, and just Elizabeth Moss' performance was phenomenal. I just love her as an actress. I think she's so good. But just the whole story and how she was able to escape, it was wild. Definitely recommend watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. We won't give away too much from it, but it's basically the premise is that her husband or her ex-husband or ex-boyfriend was a tech genius or a technology guy or science guy. He figured out this way of becoming invisible, but then he died, quote unquote. And he leaves when he dies. He leaves his house to her in the will, so she goes to live there, and she's like feeling like there's something's not right, and so it's just that kind of premise. So it's like a kind of like a get away from your ex spouse because they're abusive kind of situation, and then what if that ex spouse was now invisible? Like that would be horrifying. So he does a really good job of capturing that fear and that horror of the situation. But it's the Invisible Man, which is also a part of that Universal Monsters from the 1940s, iconic characters. So Lee Whannell kind of is kind of bringing these old characters into the 21st century in a really fresh way, because the technology that's in the Invisible Man is really like, it feels very believable and very real. And I think the way that we've seen the Wolfman trailers is like, okay, this is not the classic Wolfman story, but it's definitely kind of, you're definitely seeing this kind of newer kind of take on that classic story. So he's like taking these old stories and bringing them and making them super fresh. So I'm all for it. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah. So that is our episode. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you, Kristen, for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Hope y'all have a great week.
Yep. And go see Wolfman in theaters this Friday. Check it out. Thanks so much for listening to the Movies That Make You podcast, where movies are a catalyst for meaningful conversations. We hope you'll give us a like, a share. Let us know you were here over at our Instagram at Movies That Make You. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. So until next time, keep watching movies.